Hi, this is Dr. Pike again. Now we're going to go over the text for Week 1 reading, and that's going to be Judgment in Managerial Decision Making by Bazerman and Moore. This is Chapter 1, Introduction to Managerial Decision Making. Now in Chapter 1 they talk about the anatomy of a decision. First, we need to define the problem. Managers often act with a thorough understanding of a problem. Accurate judgment is required to identify and define problems. Now, where they err is they define a problem in terms of a proposed solution. So they try to work backwards on the problem. And they could be missing a bigger problem by doing this. Diagnosing the problems in terms of its symptoms can leave you short-sighted and not see the big picture. In identifying the criteria, there is usually more than one objective in making a decision. Successful decision makers identify all relevant criteria, because this requires a careful examination of relevant data. We want to weigh the criteria. And it's because the criteria varies in importance. Value must be placed on individual criteria. Some things are more important than others. And if we define the criteria with a scoring system, we can give greater gravity to those things that require immediate attention. We want to generate alternatives. Identification of possible courses of action. Time-conserving measures must be employed while identifying possible alternatives. This could be a time-sensitive problem that costs us financially as well as politically. We want to rate each of the alternatives on their criteria. The decision maker must determine how well each of the alternative solutions achieve the desired result. This is the most difficult stage of the decision-making process. This makes us forecasters, and we have to look into the future to determine what events are on the horizon. And we have to assess potential consequences for how they can impact what we're trying to do. Therefore, we have to compute the optimal decision. Multiplying the ratings in step 5, what we just saw, rate each alternative on each criterion by the weight of each criterion. Adding up the weighted ratings across all of the criteria for each alternative. Choose the solution with the highest sum of the weighted ratings for the greatest result. Now, in the book, it talks about System 1 and System 2 thinking. In System 1 thinking, this is intuitive thinking, and it's fast, automatic, effortless, implicit, emotional, and unconscious. This thinking is common when people are rushed, busy, or preoccupied. Mostly if we have to come up with solutions that have to be implemented quickly. This is the type of thinking that we'll employ. System 2 thinking is logic-based. It's reasoning. It's a slower way of thinking that we want to be conscious. It is very, very effortful, explicit, and logical. This type of thinking is deliberate and takes time, whereas sometimes decisions need to be made immediately, like we just spoke about. Transitioning to the bounds of human intention and rationality. For purposes of this text, rationality refers to the decision-making process that is logically expected to lead to the optimal result. In speaking about the rational model, we talk about a set of assumptions that prescribe how a decision should be made rather than describing how a decision is made. Now, the study that we're talking about is attributed to Nobel laureate Herbert Simon, and he had two schools of thought. He had the study of prescriptive models and the study of descriptive models. Prescriptive decision analysis develops models which are often mathematical or statistical. Same. Researchers in descriptive model making study how decisions are actually made. So, whereas you may have a helicopter model where you get to see the overview of the landscape from the prescriptive model, your descriptive model is more often boots on the ground. It is a field study, and they tend to ask qualitative questions of persons of how they individually make decisions. Now, this word satisfice, we want to talk about it as it's defined in the text. And it's a shortage of information to make a decision, a limit of time or funds to make a decision, perception limitations, intellectual limitations, and often we forego the best solution in favor of one that is acceptable and reasonable, and this satisfies all parties. When we're talking about decision making, we have to look at bias. All of us come with unconscious biases towards the decision making process. We have predispositions due to individual life experiences, and these create directional biases. Our biases influence and affect our judgment. We apply rules of thumb, heuristics. We simplify strategies to quickly grasp a given problem in decision making. And this could be because we've faced certain problems in the past and these solutions have worked for us. Heuristics provide time-pressured managers and other professionals with a simple way of dealing with a complex world. Most are unaware of when they are using heuristics. There are 4 general heuristics, and we're going to discuss them. First, let's talk about the availability heuristic. And this has to do with frequency, probability, or likely causes of an event by the degree to which instances or occurrences of that event are readily available in memory. We've dealt with something like this before. And you have to understand that our experiences build upon that. Quality leadership requires experience from individuals. It's not just intellect, it's also acumen, in that these people have come across situations that are untenable to others, and they've quickly reacted to circumstances by the utilization of this heuristic bias. It's not always a negative thing, but it does limit our ability to look at the global picture of the problem that we are trying to solve. When we're looking at the representativeness heuristic, and these are previously formed stereotypes, traits established by prior interactions with persons or things that we've come in contact with. They're generalities. And I can tell you that these biases, I had an experience where I went to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And in that, I had notions and preconceived biases that I was completely unaware of. And the trip to the museum brought them to the forefront of things that I needed to take a look at and have helped me in countless leadership activities as well as in my own home. So I can tell you that these stereotypes do exist, and we constantly have to be aware of them and understand that they can affect our decision-making prowess. So the confirmation heuristic. In this heuristic, there's a search to interpret evidence in a way that supports conclusions favored by the interpreter on the outset. We hypothesize that we understand and know the best possible solution prior to knowing that the problem what the problem actually is or what it consists of. And it's part of proving oneself right. And in that, we may be right in our own minds, but we haven't solved the problem. And this is something we need to be aware of. The affect heuristic is when emotions override the higher level reasoning that we have. We become biased by emotion in favor of or at the deficit of another or a given situation. And this is highly related to the System 1 thinking that we previously discussed. Now, we've had a lot of information in week 1, and I want to say thank you for sticking with me this far. There are a great number of assignments that are due by next Sunday, and I'll be waiting for you to remit them, and I look forward to getting to know you in your YouTube introductions. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.